What if I told you that Carl Jung uncovered a psychological phenomenon so profound it could either elevate you to extraordinary heights or completely shatter your mental stability? This isn't about mental disorders or clinical pathology. This is about individuals who possess an almost supernatural ability to read people, situations, and hidden psychological dynamics that remain invisible to everyone else. Jung called these people the psychologically gifted, and he discovered that their extraordinary perceptive abilities came with a devastating cost that most never recover from. Today, we're diving deep into sacred patterns to explore Jung's most controversial finding about people who see beyond the veil of human consciousness, and why this rare gift either transforms you into something remarkable or destroys you completely. Patient that changed everything in 1913, during Jung's tumultuous separation from Freud and his own descent into what he called his creative illness. A mysterious patient entered his practice. This woman possessed what Jung would later classify as the most enigmatic personality configuration in his entire typological system. She walked into Jung's office carrying an invisible weight that seemed to emanate from her very presence. Within minutes of conversation, she demonstrated something that left Jung both fascinated and deeply concerned. This patient could decode the emotional landscape of any environment instantly. She sensed deception before words were spoken. She felt the psychological pain others carried like physical sensations in her own body. She perceived the hidden resentments, fears, and desires that people spent lifetimes concealing from themselves. But here's what made Jung classify this as dangerous. This extraordinary perception was slowly destroying her life. She couldn't engage in casual conversation because every interaction revealed layers of meaning that others weren't ready to acknowledge. Friendships crumbled because people felt psychologically naked around her. Employment became impossible because her mere presence disrupted the comfortable illusions that kept workplace dynamics functioning. Jung realized he wasn't treating mental illness. He was witnessing what happens when consciousness evolves beyond social compatibility, the four phases of psychological hypersensitivity. Through years of clinical observation, Jung identified four distinct manifestations of this extraordinary perceptive ability. Each type processed psychological information differently, but all shared the same fundamental challenge: seeing too much, too clearly, too often. The emotional absorber. These individuals don't just observe emotions. They experience them as if they were their own. Walk into a room filled with tension, and they feel it in their chest. Encounter someone grieving, and sadness overwhelms them without explanation. They become psychological sponges, absorbing the emotional residue of everyone they encounter. Jung noted, these souls live in perpetual emotional chaos, drowning in feelings that don't belong to them, yet feeling responsible for emotional states they never created. The pattern prophet. These people see psychological trajectories with startling accuracy. They predict relationship failures months before the first argument. They sense career disasters brewing in seemingly successful situations. They witness personal breakdowns approaching like storm systems on a radar screen. Their curse? Knowing outcomes they're powerless to prevent. Watching people make predictable mistakes while being dismissed as pessimistic or negative. The physical, intuitive. These individuals sense the bodily manifestations of psychological distress in others. They detect illness before symptoms appear. They feel exhaustion radiating from people who haven't acknowledged their own fatigue. They serve as early warning systems for psychological and physical breakdown. Jung observed they carry the physical symptoms of collective unconscious distress, becoming barometers for societal psychological health. The overwhelmed oracle, the rarest type Jung encountered, combined intense perception with an inability to organize or express their insights coherently. They received vast amounts of psychological information but lacked the framework to process it constructively. These individuals often appeared confused or unstable, not because their perceptions were wrong, but because they were drowning in accurate information they couldn't structure or communicate effectively. The three deadly dangers. Jung discovered. Jung's research revealed why he considered this discovery so threatening. Superior perception created three specific dangers that could devastate both individuals and the communities around them. Danger 1. Collective illusion disruption. Every human group, families, workplaces, societies functions partly through shared agreements about what will and won't be acknowledged. These invisible contracts keep social harmony intact. The psychologically gifted individual unknowingly violates these agreements simply by existing authentically. They see through the polite lies, the convenient self-deceptions, and the comfortable narratives that others use to navigate daily life. Jung wrote, when someone perceives the hidden truths that groups unconsciously agree to ignore, they become a destabilizing force in the collective psychological system. Danger 2. Existential isolation. Superior perception creates what Jung called consciousness imprisonment. When your psychological reality differs dramatically from everyone around you, you begin living in a fundamentally different universe. This isn't just loneliness, it's existential separation. You're surrounded by people who seem to be sleepwalking through experiences you perceive with crystal clarity. Jung observed, the cursed gift of consciousness cannot be shared with those who don't possess it. The individual becomes an island of awareness in an ocean of unconscious living. Danger 3. Identity dissolution. Most dangerously, people who absorb psychological content from others often lose contact with their authentic selves. They become so flooded with external psychological material that they can't distinguish between their own inner world and what they're unconsciously collecting from their environment. Jung termed this psychological possession, a state where individual identity dissolves into a chaotic mixture of absorbed content from others. He warned, the ultimate danger is not social rejection, but complete loss of self, psychological annihilation through unlimited absorption of collective unconscious material. The integration protocol, Jung's solution because uncontrolled superior perception posed such significant dangers. Jung developed a systematic approach to transforming this potentially destructive gift into conscious wisdom. Phase 1. Psychological archaeology. The first challenge involves learning to distinguish between your authentic inner experience and psychological material you've unconsciously absorbed from others. Jung instructed his patients to spend extended periods in complete solitude, allowing absorbed emotional and psychological content to settle like sediment in still water. Only in this stillness could they begin recognizing their own authentic psychological voice. Phase 2. Shadow integration. Jung discovered that people who clearly see others' hidden psychological content often do so because they haven't acknowledged their own capacity for deception, selfishness, or cruelty. The more you deny your own psychological complexity, the more disturbed you become when witnessing these qualities in others. Shadow. Integration means acknowledging that you contain every human quality you observe in others. This doesn't make you morally compromised. It makes you psychologically complete and capable of seeing clearly without judgment. Phase 3. Conscious participation. The final phase involves learning to engage with others' psychological content without being overwhelmed or losing your individual identity. Jung called this developing psychological containers, the ability to temporarily hold others' unconscious material while maintaining awareness that it doesn't belong to you. This requires what Jung termed conscious compassion, seeing clearly while remaining emotionally regulated, perceiving deeply while maintaining healthy psychological boundaries. Historical case studies. Success and destruction. Jung studied historical figures to understand the difference between successful integration and psychological collapse when dealing with superior perception. The cautionary tale of Jung was deeply influenced by Nietzsche's philosophical insights, but observed how his extraordinary perception ultimately led to psychological breakdown. Nietzsche possessed devastating clarity about human nature, social institutions, and philosophical illusions. However, Jung noted that Nietzsche never learned to integrate these insights constructively. Instead of using his perception to heal or build, he wielded it as a weapon against society. Jung observed Nietzsche remained identified with his superior function rather than integrating it into balanced personality development. Nietzsche's isolation and eventual mental collapse represented what happens when superior perception remains unintegrated. The individual becomes consumed by what they see rather than transformed by it. The success story of Meister Eckhart. Jung extensively studied the medieval mystic Meister Eckhart as an example of successfully integrated superior perception. Eckhart possessed what Jung called mystical intuition, the ability to perceive spiritual and psychological realities invisible to others. But unlike Nietzsche, Eckhart channeled his insights into compassionate service. Jung noted, Eckhart transformed his superior perception into wisdom that nourished others without overwhelming them. He saw clearly but communicated in ways that invited understanding rather than resistance. Eckhart's success came from what Jung called conscious humility, recognizing that superior perception is a gift meant for wise sharing, not a weapon for attacking unconscious living. Jung's personal journey. Most significantly, Jung documented his own struggle with overwhelming perception during his famous confrontation with the unconscious. From 1913 to 1919, Jung wrote, "I was threatened by psychosis and was saved only by my ability to understand what was happening through my clinical work with similar cases." His superior perception of unconscious content, both his own and others, nearly destroyed him until he learned conscious integration techniques. Jung's breakthrough came when he realized his overwhelming perceptions weren't pathological but evolutionary. Consciousness attempting to develop beyond current collective limitations, finding your psychological tribe, because superior perception often leads to isolation. Jung emphasized the crucial importance of finding what he called consciousness companions, others capable of engaging with differentiated awareness without defensiveness, fellow travelers, other individuals who have successfully integrated their own superior perception. These connections often happen instantly and intensely. You recognize each other as members of what Jung called the conscious minority. Active seekers, people engaged in serious psychological development work who may not possess superior perception themselves but understand its value. They've begun knowing themselves and can therefore bear being known by others. Natural containers, individuals who, while not possessing superior perception, have what Jung called natural container function, the ability to hold psychological content without being overwhelmed. Jung developed specific indicators for identifying safe relationships. They ask genuine questions about your observations rather than immediately defending against them. They acknowledge their own contradictions without shame. They maintain emotional stability when confronted with uncomfortable truths. The transformation stages. Jung identified 4 stages in successfully transforming superior perception from burden to gift. Stage 1. Recognition without overwhelm, learning to acknowledge your perceptive abilities without being crushed by them. Jung called this conscious acceptance of the superior function. Stage 2. Integration without isolation, learning to use perception constructively while maintaining meaningful relationships. This involves becoming authentically yourself while remaining connected to others. Stage 3. Service without sacrifice, your perception becomes something you offer rather than something you suffer. You use your abilities to help others without depleting yourself. Stage 4. Legacy without attachment, using your perception to contribute to collective consciousness evolution without needing recognition or acceptance from others. The evolutionary purpose. Jung believed individuals with superior perception serve a vital evolutionary function. They see what collective consciousness isn't ready to acknowledge, helping prepare humanity for necessary developmental steps. Jung wrote, "What remains unconscious comes to us as fate." Highly perceptive individuals who achieve integration help make unconscious content conscious before it manifests destructively in collective behavior. These individuals serve as consciousness pioneers, advanced scouts for psychological territories that humanity will eventually need to explore. The modern manifestation in our current era. Jung believed highly perceptive individuals might be sensing psychological patterns explaining collective behavioral problems, environmental and social unsustainability before it becomes obvious spiritual possibilities. Beyond current religious frameworks, technological implications, others haven't considered collective shadow content requiring conscious integration. The integration pitfalls. Jung documented common ways individuals derail their transformation process. The inflation trap, becoming identified with superior perception rather than integrating it consciously. This leads to what Jung called the prophet complex, believing you must save everyone from unconsciousness, the withdrawal justification. Using superior perception to justify complete social withdrawal, convincing yourself others are too unconscious. To engage. The helper's high, becoming addicted to being needed, defining yourself entirely through your ability to see and help others. The overwhelm return, regressing during stress and becoming flooded with others. Unconscious content again. The ultimate integration at the highest development level. Jung observed individuals who held their abilities lightly, seeing clearly without attachment to outcomes, accepting what they perceive without compulsion to fix everything they observe. Jung called this the transcendent function, serving consciousness evolution naturally without forcing or preaching, simply by embodying more conscious ways of being. The transformed life. Remember Jung's original patient from 1913? After 3 years of integration work, her life transformed completely. She learned to distinguish between her own psychological content and absorbed material. She found meaningful work where her perception helped others. She built relationships with people who valued rather than feared her insights. Most importantly, she stopped experiencing superior perception as a curse and began understanding it as what Jung called a gift requiring conscious development. Jung wrote about her transformation. The patient learned not to see less, but to see more wisely. Not to perceive less deeply, but to engage more consciously with what she perceived. Your evolutionary assignment, if you recognize yourself in these descriptions, you're part of what Jung considered essential for consciousness evolution. Your superior perception isn't a malfunction. It's an advanced feature of psychological development. You're not broken because you see what others miss. You're psychologically ahead of your time. The question isn't whether you should suppress your perception to fit collective unconsciousness. The question is whether you'll develop the integration skills necessary to transform dangerous perception into conscious wisdom. Your gift isn't your burden. Your unconscious relationship to your gift is your burden. Learn to integrate it consciously, and you become exactly what Jung believed highly perceptive individuals were meant to be: consciousness pioneers, preparing humanity for inevitable psychological development. Jung's most dangerous discovery wasn't that some people see everything. It's that most people who see everything never learn conscious integration of their extraordinary abilities. You are not too much for this world. You are exactly what consciousness evolution requires. Which type of differentiated perceiver do you recognize in yourself? Share your insights in the comments below. Your integration journey connects with others walking this same challenging but essential path. Subscribe to Sacred Patterns for more explorations of Jung's discoveries about psychological development that transcends collective unconscious limitations. If you're ready to explore more of Jung's insights about psychological types that don't fit conventional patterns, check out our video on Jung's 7 dangerous psychological environments that can destroy highly sensitive individuals, where we reveal the toxic situations that are particularly harmful for perceptive people and Jung's strategies for protecting your consciousness while engaging with an unconscious world. Thank you for joining us on Sacred Patterns. We'll see you in the next exploration of consciousness evolution.